Humanity had long known that the universe was vast and filled with mysteries, but nothing could prepare them for the day they stumbled upon the Galactic Empire. It all began during a routine deep space exploration mission. Earth had sent out ships to chart unknown star systems, their technology far advanced from what humanity had once dreamed possible, but nothing could have prepared them for the encounter that would change everything. The mission's objective was simple: locate new planets for potential resources and study distant star systems. The ship, Unity, a massive vessel designed for deep space travel, had been cruising through the farthest reaches of the galaxy when it first detected something unusual. A blip on the radar, unlike anything they had ever seen before. No one knew what it was, but it was heading straight toward them. The crew of Unity had been trained for every scenario: pirates, hostile alien species, and even natural space anomalies. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. As the Unity moved closer to the source of the mysterious blip, they realized that it wasn't a space anomaly or a random piece of debris. It was a fleet, no, an entire armada of ships, each one more massive than anything Earth had ever built. These were not the makeshift ships of desperate pirates or rebellious colonies. These were the ships of an empire. The crew could feel the tension building in the air. Their instruments confirmed it. They were facing a fleet of military-grade warships. And the strangest thing of all, the fleet wasn't making any attempt to hide. It moved toward the Unity at a deliberate pace, as if the ships knew exactly where they were going. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt at communication, just a slow march through the void. Captain Elena Harris stood on the bridge, staring out the viewport, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "What are we dealing with here?" she muttered under her breath. The crew remained silent, unsure how to respond. The fleet wasn't just big, it was intimidating. The sheer size of the ships dwarfed the Unity, and their dark, sleek designs seemed to shimmer ominously against the backdrop of the stars. Every ship looked like a fortress, heavily armed with weapons that made the Unity's defenses look like toys in comparison. The crew knew that if it came to a fight, they had no chance. But something about the situation felt off. As the enemy fleet closed in, they didn't fire a single shot. No sign of aggression, no warning signs. The humans were left in a tense silence. They were surrounded, outgunned, and completely at the mercy of whatever this empire was. And yet, there was no attack. "Prepare for communication," Captain Harris ordered, her voice steady, but filled with uncertainty. This wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't ready for something like this, not this calm. Minutes passed and still, no one spoke. Then finally a transmission came through. A voice, deep and unsettling, echoed through the ship's comms. "Human vessel, you are within the territory of the Galactic Empire. You will surrender your vessel and prepare for examination." It was a calm voice. Too calm. No threat in the tone, no anger, no demand for immediate action. It was simply calm. That was when it hit the crew. This was not an empire that relied on brute force alone. This was something else. Something that commanded respect, not with fear, but with control. Captain Harris tried to steady her nerves. "This is Captain Elena Harris of the Unity. From Earth. We don't want any trouble. We're just exploring. We have no intention of invading your territory." The voice on the other end didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched on for several seconds, leaving the crew to wonder if their transmission had been received. Finally, the voice returned. "Humanity has no place here. You are to leave immediately." The message was simple, yet it carried an undeniable weight. The calmness in the voice was almost more terrifying than if they had threatened to destroy them. It felt deliberate, as if the Empire was certain they could control the situation without any need for violence. Captain Harris's mind raced. What kind of empire was this? An empire that didn't need to raise its weapons to strike fear into others. This was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The crew, tense and on edge, exchanged nervous glances. They could feel the pressure of this unseen enemy. the weight of the silent threat that lingered in the air. "We will comply," Harris said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like defeat, but in that moment, it was the only choice they had. As the Unity slowly turned to retreat, the fleet around them remained still, watching. No weapons were aimed at them. No force was applied. The Empire's ships simply surrounded the Unity, their dark, imposing figures a reminder of the power that held them in place. The calmness of their response, their absolute control over the situation, was more terrifying than anything Earth had faced before. The crew of Unity didn't know it yet, but they had just encountered a force far beyond anything they could have imagined. And their calmness, that unnerving, unshakable composure, would prove to be a deadly weapon in a way they never could have predicted. As the Unity made its way back, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. What would happen when the Empire decided they had no more use for Earth? And how would humanity ever stand up to such a force, when their calmness alone was more dangerous than any army? The answers, they soon realized, were far more complicated than they could have ever imagined. The Unity limped back toward Earth's orbit, its crew still reeling from the encounter with the Galactic Empire. The silence in the command center was palpable, broken only by the low hum of the ship's systems. Captain Harris stood at the front of the bridge, staring out into the endless void, trying to make sense of the events that had just unfolded. The Empire had made its message clear. Humanity was insignificant in their eyes, but there was something more, something deeper to it. The crew was shaken, but they knew one thing for sure. They had just faced the first test of something much larger than anything Earth had ever known. For the first time, they understood that the universe was not just a collection of isolated civilizations, it was a battlefield, and they were not prepared for the war ahead. "We need to report this immediately," Commander Jacob said, breaking the silence. "We've encountered an alien empire. They're stronger than we thought. They didn't even hesitate." Harris turned toward him, her face set with a new determination. "Not a word of this leaves this ship until we know exactly what we're dealing with. They wanted us to leave, that's all. They didn't open fire, they didn't attack. Why?" Jacobs opened his mouth to speak but then closed it, unsure of how to answer. He was right. The Empire had surrounded them, with ships the size of small moons, armed with weapons powerful enough to obliterate Earth's fleet in seconds. Yet, there was no aggression. They hadn't made a single move to destroy or conquer them. It was as if humanity's very presence had caused them to pause. "Captain, I've been analyzing their communication," Lieutenant Martinez, the ship's communications officer, said from her station. She didn't look up, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. The transmission wasn't just a warning, it felt like they were testing us. A cold shiver ran down Harris's spine. Testing them? Why? The question had been gnawing at her since the moment the fleet first appeared. The Empire could have wiped them out in an instant if they wanted to. Instead, they did nothing. It made no sense. "Testing us for what?" she muttered under her breath. Suddenly, the ship's main screen flickered to life. A new transmission was incoming. Harris's heart skipped a beat as she stepped forward to accept it. The face of an alien appeared on the screen, a tall, elegant figure draped in ornate robes, his skin a deep shade of violet, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His posture was regal, and his expression was calm, too calm. "This is Lord Zentar of the Galactic Empire." The alien's voice resonated with authority. "You have been warned once, human. You have no place in our domain. Leave now or face consequences far beyond your comprehension." There was no anger in his voice, no threat of fire and destruction, just calm, cold certainty. The kind of calm that, if anything, sent a wave of unease through Harris's chest. She could feel the weight of his presence even through the screen. "We intend to comply," Captain Harris said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling at the back of her mind. "We'll leave your territory immediately. But what happens if we don't?" Zentar's eyes glowed faintly as he stared at her. "You have already made your choice. Your calm is what we will remember most. Do not mistake this for mercy. We simply do not find it necessary to waste our energy on your insignificant race." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Harris with more questions than answers. It was clear that humanity was nothing more than a fleeting thought to the Empire. Their arrogance was unsettling, but there was something even more troubling about the way they conducted themselves. The calmness, the perfect, unnerving composure. It was as if they knew humanity's place in the universe already, and there was nothing to be done to change it. As the Unity continued on its course back to Earth, Harris gathered her senior officers in the conference room. They needed a plan. There was no way they could go back home, report their encounter, and simply continue their lives as though nothing had happened. The Empire was out there, and they would not forget the humans' audacity to even exist in their space. "Here's what we know," Harris began, her voice firm. "The Empire is vast and powerful, but they are not reckless. Their ships are capable of annihilating us in an instant, yet they chose not to. They didn't fire. They didn't engage us in battle. Why? What is it about us that made them hesitate?" Lieutenant Martinez spoke up. "Maybe they saw something in us that we don't see in ourselves, something that made them pause before striking." Commander Jacobs shook his head. "No. If they saw anything, it was nothing more than an opportunity to crush us without resistance. But they didn't. They showed restraint." Harris sat back, her mind racing. What if their calmness isn't just a sign of power? What if it's a test? A measure of our response, a way of determining whether we're a threat? The room fell silent as the officers considered the possibility. Harris's thoughts echoed in her mind. What if humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or military might? What if it was their ability to remain calm under pressure? Could that calmness, that simple presence of mind, be something the Empire had never encountered before? The answer didn't come easily, but the pieces were starting to fit together. The Empire was powerful, yes, but there was something else that set them apart from all the other empires humanity had encountered. They didn't fight with brute force. They fought with precision, with calculated patience. And that was something humanity would need to learn if they were ever to stand a chance against them. "We need to prepare," Harris said finally. "Not just to leave, but to understand. If we're going to survive, we need to find a way to match their calmness and their power." Days passed since the tense encounter with the Galactic Empire, and still the crew of the Unity couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger than they realized was unfolding. Captain Harris found herself pacing the bridge, her mind racing with the possibilities. Humanity had faced down the might of an entire empire without firing a single shot, but that was only the beginning. Now the question was, what would the Empire do next? As the Unity continued its journey home, the crew worked tirelessly to analyze every detail of their encounter. They pored over data logs, examined the alien communication channels, and studied everything about the Empire's fleet. Yet no answers seemed to emerge. It was as if the Galactic Empire had no clear purpose other than their cold, emotionless demeanor. What did they want with Earth, if anything? Why hadn't they wiped them out? They could have easily done so. One evening, while reviewing the data in her private quarters, Harris stumbled across something that made her stop in her tracks. She'd been cross-referencing the signals from the Empire's ships with data they had gathered from other alien races over the years. And there it was, a pattern. A subtle shift in the Empire's communication codes that didn't quite add up. "Commander Jacobs," Harris called out, rushing to the communications room. "I think I've found something." Jacobs was at his station within moments, his brow furrowed as he leaned over Harris's shoulder. Together they analyzed the data, their eyes scanning the intricate patterns in the Empire's transmissions. It was a hidden code, a message buried within the static. "It's encrypted," Jacobs said, his voice rising with a mix of excitement and frustration. "But this doesn't make sense. It's almost as if they want us to find it." Harris frowned. "Why would they want us to find a code that's meant to be secret?" "Maybe it's a test," Jacobs suggested, his tone thoughtful. "They've already shown they're testing us. Maybe they want to see if we're smart enough to decode it." Harris rubbed her temples, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Whatever it is, we need to know what this code says. Let's decrypt it and see if it gives us any clues about their next move. It took hours, but the code finally unraveled, revealing a chilling message from the Empire. Humanity is not a threat to us. You are a curiosity. You will be studied. Prepare for the trial. A cold shiver ran down Harris's spine as she read the message aloud. Studied? A trial? She looked up at Jacobs, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not just testing us with their calmness. They're observing us. They want to understand us. They want to see how we react to everything they throw at us. And that trial, Jacobs began, trailing off. It could be a test of our endurance, our resolve, our humanity. For the first time, Harris realized the full scope of the Empire's intentions. They weren't interested in Earth for conquest. They didn't need resources or land. What they were after was something far more elusive. They wanted to study humanity, to see if humans were worthy of existing in their galaxy, to see if humanity could survive their calm, calculating approach to power. We're not just facing a battle, Harris muttered. We're facing a trial by intellect. The Empire wants to break us, not with weapons, but with patience, with strategy, with every move designed to make us question who we are. The crew sat in stunned silence as the realization set in. Humanity had always relied on brute force, on strength, to survive. But now, in the face of this Empire, their old methods of fighting didn't apply. The Empire wasn't testing their strength. It was testing their minds. How would humanity react under pressure when faced with something that didn't move, didn't attack, but simply watched? We need to prepare, Harris said finally, her voice firm. If we're going to survive this, we need to play their game. We can't react with violence. That's exactly what they want. We need to outsmart them. The crew knew what needed to be done. They would need to gather every resource, every bit of knowledge they could muster, and prepare themselves for a fight unlike any they had ever known. But this fight wouldn't be fought with guns or bombs. It would be fought with intelligence, with patience, and with the strength to endure. Meanwhile, far from Earth, in the heart of the Galactic Empire, Lord Zentar sat in his command chamber, observing the transmission from the Unity. He knew humanity's response would be critical. They had passed the first test, showing them that they could remain calm in the face of overwhelming power. But now, Zentar needed to see more. He needed to see if humanity could endure, if they could stand up to the Empire's methods without breaking. Send the next wave, Zentar commanded, his voice cool and calculating. Let us see if their calmness holds when we push them further. He knew that the trial was just beginning, and this would be the true test of humanity's resolve. The Empire had dealt with countless species across the galaxy, but none had ever reacted like the humans. They didn't fall apart under pressure. They didn't surrender without a fight. They stayed calm. They stood their ground. And that, Zentar realized, might just be the most dangerous thing of all. As the next phase of the trial began, Harris and her crew braced themselves for what was coming. The Empire's next move was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The game was on, and humanity had just entered a battle of wills, where the mind would be their sharpest weapon. They would need every ounce of strength, intelligence, and calm they could muster if they were to survive. The days that followed were tense. The crew of the Unity locked in a quiet battle of wits against an Empire they didn't fully understand. The message from Lord Zentar echoed in Captain Harris's mind constantly. You will be studied. Prepare for the trial. That trial was already underway, but the crew had no idea what it would look like. The Empire wasn't attacking them directly. Instead, it was pushing them, probing their limits, watching their every move. Every decision Harris made felt like it could be a test. Every strategy, every plan, every moment of calmness was under a microscope. Humanity had always relied on its emotions, its passion, its will to fight. But now, they were being forced into a situation where emotion couldn't win the day. Only calculated, precise actions could determine their survival. The Empire's next move came without warning. One evening, as the Unity glided through the cold expanse of space, a transmission came through. It wasn't from Lord Zentar. but from another alien voice. The tone was even more calculated, colder than anything they had heard before. Human. Vessel, you are instructed to abandon all outer systems, the voice said. You have encroached on our domain for too long. Leave immediately or face consequences. Harris's grip tightened on the console. Leave immediately or face consequences. This wasn't the brash arrogance of a typical enemy. This was a warning, delivered without emotion. But there was a chilling finality to it. No threats, no empty bravado, just a cold command. It was as if the Empire was confident they could push humanity to the brink, and they'd still make it out unscathed. But Harris didn't flinch. She looked out the viewport, her gaze steady, unwavering. The crew was tense, but they had learned one valuable lesson from their last encounter with the Empire. Calmness was their most powerful weapon. If they lost their cool now, the Empire would have them exactly where they wanted. Hold course, Harris commanded, her voice calm but resolute. We're not going anywhere. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment the entire crew seemed to hold their breath. The Unity kept moving through space, heading deeper into the Empire's territory. The ship, though vastly outmatched, was a symbol of humanity's defiance. Then came the second part of the Empire's test. Without warning, a wave of smaller, faster ships appeared on the Unity's radar. They were scattered across the sector, closing in from all directions. These ships were different from the massive warships they had faced before. They were sleek, agile, and clearly designed for one purpose: to overwhelm. The crew scrambled to prepare the ship for an imminent encounter. But Harris held her ground. She turned to her officers, her voice unwavering. Keep calm, she said. These ships are fast, but we've trained for this. Let's use their speed against them. As the ships closed in, the tension on the Unity grew thick. The smaller vessels darted toward them, testing their defenses, probing for weakness. For every evasive maneuver the Unity made, the Empire's ships seemed to anticipate it, closing in even faster. But Harris remained calm, watching the situation unfold with a sharp focus. She was no longer simply reacting to the Empire's movements. She was reading them. Each ship's pattern, each shift in position was a signal. She could see their strategy unfolding before they even moved. With a deep breath, she gave the order. Initiate countermeasures. Bring us around the outer edge. Use their momentum against them. The Unity shifted quickly, executing a sharp turn that brought the ship directly into the path of the nearest enemy vessel. The Empire's ship, overconfident in its speed, attempted to adjust course, but it was too late. The smaller ships began to collide with each other as they tried to follow the Unity, losing their precision and creating confusion in their ranks. Harris watched as the Empire's fleet, once so sure of themselves, began to falter. Their calm, precision was their strength, but it was also their downfall. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to think outside of the cold calculations they relied on. In that moment, Harris realized something. The Empire's greatest strength was their composure, their ability to remain unshaken by the chaos of war. But humanity's strength was something else entirely. It was their ability to adapt, to find new paths in the midst of danger, to turn the tables when everything seemed impossible. The smaller ships began to retreat, their plans unraveling. The Unity had outsmarted them, using their own momentum and overconfidence against them. For the first time in the trial, the Empire had miscalculated. They had thought they could control humanity with their calm, calculated approach, but they hadn't accounted for the unpredictability of human ingenuity. Well done, Captain, Jacobs said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. You've shown them that we can think faster than they expected. Harris nodded, but she didn't smile. She knew this was just one victory in a much larger war. The Empire would not stop. They would push harder, test humanity's limits in ways they hadn't yet imagined. But in that moment, Harris allowed herself one small victory. Humanity had proven its worth. They weren't just a curiosity. They were a challenge. As the Unity continued its journey, the crew knew that they had only begun to scratch the surface of what the Galactic Empire had in store for them. But they also knew one thing for sure. Humanity was far more resilient than the Empire had ever imagined. And now they had their first glimpse of the Empire's weakness, their arrogance in underestimating humanity's unpredictable strength. The trial was far from over, but humanity had just made their mark. They weren't going to go down without a fight. Not today and not ever. The aftermath of the small victory over the Empire's fleet was filled with uncertainty. The Unity sailed through the vast emptiness of space, its crew more united than ever, but their minds heavy with what they had just faced, and what still lay ahead. Captain Harris stood in the command center, her hands gripping the edge of the console as she looked out into the deep void. The Empire's next move was unpredictable. They had tested humanity's ability to remain calm, and now they had seen the strength of that calmness. But what would they do next? Would they escalate? Would they push humanity further to the brink? Captain, Lieutenant Martinez's voice broke the silence. We've been receiving messages from Earth. They're expecting us to return soon, but there's something strange in their communications. They're aware of the Empire. Harris turned sharply. What do you mean, they're aware of the Empire? Just that, Martinez replied. There's an odd level of preparedness in their messages, like they've already anticipated what we've been through. It doesn't make sense. Harris's heart skipped a beat. Earth? Earth knew we'd encounter them? Martinez nodded slowly, her brow furrowed. It's possible. There are some coded signals in their communication that suggest someone or something has known about the Empire for longer than we thought. Harris felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. How could Earth have known about the Empire? This encounter had been unprecedented, and yet it seemed there was more going on behind the scenes than they had realized. Get me a secure channel to Earth, Harris ordered, her voice suddenly sharp. I need to speak to command. Now. The response came quickly, and soon the familiar face of General Solomon appeared on the screen. The lines on his face were deeper than when Harris had last seen him. His expression was tense, but there was an undeniable calmness about him, one that mirrored the Empire's dispassionate demeanor. Captain Harris, he said, his voice steady. I knew you would make it through. You're more resilient than even I had hoped. Harris's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about, General? We're in the middle of a trial against a galactic empire. How could you possibly have known we'd make it through this? How could you have known about them at all? General, Solomon exhaled deeply, the tension in his eyes shifting to something else, something almost like regret. There are things you don't know, Captain, things that we kept from you and the crew. We've known about the Galactic Empire for years. Harris felt the world tilt beneath her. Years? You've known about them and didn't tell us? Why didn't you warn us? We couldn't, Solomon replied, his voice filled with quiet remorse. We couldn't risk alerting them to Earth's existence. We've been preparing for this moment in secret. We've studied their tactics, their calmness, their approach. We knew one day they would find us, and we needed to be ready. Harris's mind raced. But why? Why didn't you let us in on this? Why wasn't humanity prepared for this trial? Solomon's gaze softened. Because we weren't sure if humanity could rise to the challenge. We weren't sure if you would understand. We didn't think you could face the trial with the right mindset, the calmness, the patience. We thought you'd react with force, with violence, and that would have been the end. But we didn't, Harris said, her voice firm. We met them with calmness, with strategy. We outsmarted them. And that's exactly what we needed to see, Solomon said. Humanity needed to understand that the power to survive wasn't in firepower or weapons. It's in how we approach the world, how we react to the unknown. The Empire doesn't want to destroy us, Captain. They want to test us. They want to see if we're worthy of the galaxy they control. The weight of his words hung in the air. For the first time, Harris understood the Empire's true intentions. It wasn't about conquest. It wasn't about domination. The Galactic Empire wanted to gauge humanity's potential, to see if they were a threat or a potential ally. And the test wasn't just about strength. It was about endurance, intellect, and how humanity could rise above their natural instincts of aggression and fear. But there was one thing that lingered in Harris's mind. If humanity passed the test, what would happen next? Would the Empire welcome them into their fold, or would they simply move on to another species, leaving Earth to crumble under the weight of its own mistakes? "We can't just sit here and wait for the Empire to make the next move," Harris said, breaking the silence. "We need to prepare. We need to understand what they want, and we need to show them that humanity isn't just a curiosity. We're here to stay." Solomon nodded slowly. "That's exactly why we've been preparing, Captain. We've been building the knowledge and the strategies for this moment. And now you're the key. You've proven humanity's resilience. Now it's time to prove our worth." The weight of his words hit Harris hard. She was no longer just a captain of a ship. She was leading humanity's greatest trial, a test of intellect and will against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. "We won't let you down, General," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "Humanity's calmness will be our strength. We'll show them what we're made of." As the screen cut to black, Harris turned to her crew. Their faces were a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had survived the first wave of tests, but this was only the beginning. The true challenge was still ahead of them. The Empire had shown them their hand, but humanity would not back down. They would face whatever the Empire threw at them with the one weapon they had: calm, unwavering resolve. The trial had begun, but humanity was ready.